بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. All right, moving on. Um, at this point, we've covered from al-qawl, which is an utterance which has a meaning. It's used in the language. Either we have mufrad, which is a single word, or murakkab. If it's a single word, mufrad, it's either ism fi'al or harf. If it's murakkab, it's either a phrase or a sentence. Now, over here, I'm going to mention something important. In the previous lesson, I taught you that words in the Arabic language can play different roles. And based on those different roles, they will have a position. And that position will have a reflection. And we give you three famous reflections. We give you the position of rafa, which is oftentimes reflected by a dhamma, the position of nasab, which is oftentimes reflected by a fatha, and the position of jar, which is oftentimes reflected by a kasra. And we went through a few examples of this, and I'm hoping you yourself have also been through a few examples from the Quran and have sent these examples. Now, moving on, this idea of words having positions will only happen if words are attached together. Because if you have a word by itself, it can be playing a role in a sentence, right? So when it comes to the words that are mufrad words, single words, technically speaking, those single words don't yet have positions. When you put that single word in a certain role in a sentence, now it will receive a position. And think of this as the substitute players sitting on the bench. You can't assign a position to them until you actually call them and make them play in the game. So as long as a word is by itself, it's not yet in a position. Once it enters the team and it starts playing a role in that sentence, now it can receive a position. And this is why phrases are important. Because what are phrases? You're going to take single words and attach them together. What are sentences? You take single words and you attach them together. And because you're attaching them together, they begin to play a role. And once they begin to play a role, they will receive a position. But the difference between a phrase and a sentence is that a sentence gives you complete benefit. What does complete benefit mean? It means that you've mentioned the subject and you've mentioned the information. And what does a phrase give? It gives multiple words. It's multiple words, but it's yet to give a complete benefit. For instance, you said Muhammad's book. Okay, well, what about Muhammad's book? For instance, you said Zayd's friend. Well, what about Zayd's friend? For instance, you said on the desk. What is on the desk? Notice how all of these examples I gave you on the desk, Muhammad's book, Zayd's friend, in the classroom, it's all multiple words. They're all phrases. But the complete benefit is not yet achieved on account of the fact that you haven't given a subject or you haven't given an information or information. Now, after covering al mufrad, the single word, we're going to move on to cover a few famous phrases. We'll cover a few famous phrases. There's a lot of phrases in the Arabic language. And after covering a few famous phrases, we're going to move on to cover the two types of sentences in the Arabic language. The first phrase and the easiest phrase, and possibly the most used phrase, is something we call Jaar Majrur. Jaar Majrur. Now you'll notice that this word is very similar to Jar, right? It's extremely similar to Jar, which is um a state or a position. Jar was a position. So Jar Majrur is very similar to that because it's actually extracted from there. We'll explain this to you shortly, bi'idhnillah. The idea behind Jar Majrur is this. You have certain huruf, certain, again, what is the harf? Something which indicates the meaning of something else. Certain huruf that are strong enough to affect the state of the next word. And the method in which they affect the position or state, again, I told you I use position and state interchangeably. The method in which they affect the position of the next word is by causing that next word to go into Jarr. And we already came across many examples of this. So we'll give you four حروف الجارة نعم or حرف الجر over here. The four examples are في, which means in, على, which means on, min, which means from, and إلى, which means to. So you have a word, you have an ism. Let's take the example we used last time, and we'll keep it in blue because this has to do with Jar Majrur, or the state of Jar. Al-Qa'a. Now I told you default, you would read this as Al-Qa'atu. Even though technically a word by itself doesn't have a state or position. A word by itself, if it's not within a sentence, it doesn't have a position. So you have Al-Qa'atu. Now what happens is you bring fi. Fi is a harful jar. You can refer to this as a harful jar. You can call it a jar. Both is fine. You bring fi before al-qa'a. We told you fi is strong enough to affect the position of al-qa'a. When fi enters upon al-qa'a, was initially al-qa'atu becomes al-qa'ati. Al-qa'atu becomes al-qa'ati. Why did al-qa'atu become al-qa'ati? Because fi was strong enough to cause that. All right. Now, recap of the previous lesson. Al-qa'ati is in which position? Al-qa'ati is in the position of Naam. Al-qa'ati is in the position of jar. And how is jar reflected? Jar is reflected by a kasrah. So, role, position, reflection. Role, position, reflection. Fi over here is what we call a harful jar. Fi, we call this a harful jar. This is the name. You can call it a harful jar, or you can refer to it as the jar. Al-jar, which basically means the jar giver. Okay. Al-qa'ati also has a name. Al-qa'ati, the role al-qa'ati now is playing within the sentence on account of fi entering upon it. Al-qa'ati is now playing the role of what we call majrur. All right. Al-qa'ati is playing the role of majrur. So this over here, majrur is the role. Remember I told you I'm going to teach you the roles little by little. This is your first role you're learning today. Al-qa'ati is majrur, is playing the role, or it's in the role of majrur. How do we know it's in the role of majrur? Because there's a fi before it. So fi caused it to enter into the role of majrur. Now, the role of majrur falls under the two offensive positions. And I told you the two offensive positions are the positions of jar. So the position over here is jar. And what's the reflection of that position? The reflection of that position is the kasrah. So the role is majrur on account of the harful jar entering upon it. Fi, ala, min, or ila. The position is jar, and the reflection is the kasrah. The reflection is the kasrah. Let's take another example. We're going to take a few examples just to make this very simple and easy to understand. It's not a difficult concept. It's very easy. Ala. Ala means on. We covered in the previous lesson. Ala al-maktabi. Ala al-maktabi. Ala is the harful jar. You can call it a harful jar. Right? You can call it a jar. Right now, just call it harful jar. Make things easy. Harful jar. All right. Ala enters upon al-maktab. I told you default is al-maktabu. But because ala is strong enough to affect the position, al-maktabu becomes al-maktabi. And because it's coming after a harful jar, because al-maktabi is coming after a harful jar, the role of al-maktabi, what did I tell you? What is it called? Al-maktabi is called majrur. Al-maktabi is called majrur. So ala is harful jar, al-maktabi is majrur. What's the position of this role? The position is jar. And what is the reflection of this role? The reflection of this role is kasrah. Ala al-maktabi. Okay. Let's take another example. Ila. Right? For right, for instance, we have min as well. We'll take min and ila. Min. That's right. Min al-madinati. Min al-madinati. Now over here, what's happening? I'm not going to draw it out, but min is the harf al-jar. Al-madinati, on account of coming after min, is in the role of majrur. That role of majrur is in the position of jar, and the position of jar is reflected by a kasrah. All right, min al-madina ila al-bayti. All right, let's take a look at a few examples. Al-baytu becomes fil bayti. Once again, fi is a harf al-jar or al-jar. Al-bayti, the role is majrur. The role of majrur has the position of jar, and jar is reflected by a kasrah. Rajulun means a man. Min rajulin means from a man. So min enters upon rajul, and because of min entering upon rajul, what ends up happening is min is a harf al-jar. It affects the position of rajul. Rajul, which was initially rajulun, now becomes rajulin. Min rajulin, min is harf al-jar. Rajulin is majrur. That's the role. And that role of majrur falls under the position of jar. And the position of jar is reflected by a kasra, hence the kasratain at the end of rajul. Al-kursi. Ala is a harf al-jar. Ala means on. You take ala, you enter it upon al-kursi, it becomes ala al-kursi. The chair on the chair. Ala is a harf al-jar or a jar. Al-kursi is majrur. That's the role. And the role of majrur falls under the position of jar, which is reflected by a kasra, al-kursi. Masjidun means a masjid. Ila masjidin. When ila enters upon masjid, it turns it into masjidin. Ila means to a masjid. Now notice over here that ila is a harf al-jar. It means to. Masjidin becomes the majrur. And the majrur masjidin, that role falls under the position of jar, and jar is reflected by a kasra. Very simple and very easy, right? And to make it even more easier, let's go over, let's mention two rules. Rule number one, bring the harf al-jar first. And rule number two, the word after it is called majrur, right? That's all there is to it. And we can even change the word after to the role after it. The role after it is called majrur. The position of majrur is jar, and jar is reflected by a kasra at the end. So make sure to memorize, or not memorize per se, but keep these rules in mind. And what you do now is every time you come across either min, what does min mean? You have to memorize these words, by the way. Min means from, fi means in, ala means on, ila means to. Once again, min means from, fi means in, ala means on, and ila means to. I want you to keep this in mind. These four for now, and bi'idhnillah, we're going to add on later on as well. These are called harf al-jar or huruf al-jarra. In this case, we mentioned four, there's many more. All right. When these enter upon a word, the upcoming word will be in the role of majrur, and majrur receives the position of jar, and jar is reflected by a kasra at the end. You've learned your first phrase in the Arabic language, and that's all there is to it. Very easy and very simple. Okay. I'm just going to mention one example. وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ. Or this is a tad bit difficult. We'll keep the examples for later, bi'idhnillah. For now, just keep this in mind. We'll keep the examples for later, bi'idhnillah. Let's take a look at our second phrase. And when you've covered these, by the way, remember I told you that we're going to cover the roles little by little. After this, you'll have both roles of the jar state, meaning both roles of the jar position, the offensive roles, you'd have covered. So you've covered majrur, that's one role. And now you're going to cover the second role, which is mudhaf ilayhi. Okay. The second phrase is what we call the possessive phrase. Basically, you want to show A owns B. How would you show that A owns B? In English, we use either of, or like of, or the apostrophe S. So for instance, you say the book of Zaid, or you say Zaid's book. Again, over here, you're going to be writing it as an apostrophe S. What does it show? It shows that the book belongs to Zaid. Zaid owns the book. That's why it's called the possessive phrase. In Arabic, we have this phrase as well. Now, the mudaf in Arabic is the possessed. All right? The mudaf, write this down. Mudaf, mudaf ilayh. Mudaf equals possessed. Mudaf ilayh equals possessor. Mudaf, mudaf ilayh. I'll write it in Arabic as well for yourselves. Mudaf, mudaf ilayh. All right? Mudaf, mudaf ilayh. Mudaf is the possessed. Mudhaf ilay is the possessor. When it comes to English, we have two ways of saying this: the book of Zayd or Zayd's book. We're going to take Zayd's book. Let's take Zayd's book. Whenever you're working with mudhaf ilay, I want you to think of the following. Number one, who is the possessed and who is the possessor? So in Zayd's book, who is the possessed and who is the possessor? In Zayd's book, Zayd is the possessor and book is the possessed. This is not difficult to determine. As long as you know what the word means, you will be able to determine who is the possessed and who is the possessor. If I say, for instance, qalam and Zayd, for Zayd and Bayt. Bayt means home. Zayd means Zayd. So does the home own Zayd or does Zayd own the home? Obviously, Zayd owns the home. So it's not difficult to determine that Zayd is the possessor and the home is the possessed. Do you follow? Step number one, determine who the possessed, i.e., the mudaf, and who the possessor, i.e., the mudaf ilay is. Once you've determined this, bring the mudaf first. What is mudaf again? Mudaf is the possessed, and the mudaf ilay is the possessor. Bring the mudaf first. Now, why is this important? Because when it comes to English, if you say Zayd's book, if you say Zayd's book, did the possessed come first or the possessor? Think of the English. Zayd's book. In Zayd's book in English, when you use an apostrophe S, the possessor comes first. In Arabic, that's not the case. In Arabic, you have to bring the possessed first. So if you say, I want to translate Zayd's book, and you translate Zayd, and you translate book, and you say Zayd kitab, incorrect. Why is it incorrect? Because in Arabic, I told you the rule, the possessed has to come first. In this example, Zayd's book, the book is the possessed. Therefore, book needs to come first. So change the structure. If you say Zayd's book with an apostrophe S, you're going to have to bring the possessed first and then the possessor. You have to bring the mudaf first and then the mudaf ilay. So Zaydun, kitabun, for now, is incorrect. Why? Because Zayd is the mudaf ilay. He's the possessor. And kitabun is the mudaf. He is the possessed. And we told you that in Arabic, the possessor comes second, the possessed comes first. The mudaf comes first, the mudaf ilay comes second. So you have to invert this structure and say kitab and Zayd. Bring the mudaf first and bring the mudaf ilay second. Rule number two, the mudaf ilay, the mudaf does not receive alif lam or tanween. This is very interesting because I told you what? If you have alif lam, you have no tanween. And generally, if you have tanween, you have no alif lam. But the mudaf is such a word that it does not receive alif lam or tanween. The mudaf does not receive alif lam or tanween. So now that you brought your mudaf first in Zayd and Kitab, what's the mudaf? What's the possessed? The possessed is the Kitab, it's the book. So now you can't say Kitabun Zayd. You can't say Al Kitabu Zayd. Both are incorrect. You have to say Kitabu. Drop the alif lam. You cannot say Al Kitabu. And nor can you say Kitabun and drop the tanween as well. Drop the alif lam and the tanween. All you have left is Kitabu. Kitabu. That's in the mudaf. This second rule applies to mudaf. Third rule applies to the mudaf ilay, the possessor. The possessor, the mudaf ilay, this over here, mudaf ilay, this is a role which results in the position of Jarr, which is reflected by a kasrah. Therefore, if you say Kitabu, the book of Zaydun, incorrect. Why? Because who's the owner? Who's the possessor? Zayd. We told you Zayd over here is mudaf ilay. Mudaf ilay is a role. This role will result in the position of Jarr. And Jarr is reflected by a kasrah. So why are you saying Kitabu Zaydun? That would be incorrect. Likewise, if you said Kitabu Zaydan, that would also be incorrect. The correct method is to say Kitabu Zaydin. Kitabu Zaydin. In this scenario, Zayd is in Jarr. So once again, let's look at this carefully. We're going to apply all three rules. And this is how I want you to learn this. Every time you come across this, apply all three rules one by one. Because if you don't do this, it'll be very difficult. Number one, determine who's the possessed, who's the possessor. Possessed is the mudaf, possessor is the mudaf ilay. Rule number one, in Arabic, the possessed comes first, the mudaf comes first, the mudaf ilay comes second. The easy way to memorize this, if you memorize the phrase name, mudaf ilay, What's coming first? Mudaf. So you know for a fact that the possessed comes first. So you have to reinvert or restructure Zaydun kitabun to kitabun Zaydun. Kitabun Zaydun. Rule number two, mudaf, i.e. the possessed, cannot receive alif lam or tanween. You cannot say al kitabu. You cannot say kitabun. You have to say kitabu. No alif lam, no tanween. And rule number three, the mudaf ilayhi is a role which is in the position of jar. And jar is a position that's reflected by kasrah. Therefore, you don't say kitabu zaydan. You don't say kitabu zaydun. You would say kitabu zaydin. All right. How do you say a pen of a man or a man's pen? In English, you can say it in both ways, right? A man's pen. Now, the first step is to determine who's the possessed, who is the possessor. So, does the man own the pen, or does the, or this is actually not a pen, afwan, this is a key. Pen is the wrong word. A key. A man's key and a key of a man. Does the man own the key, or does the key own the man? Obviously, the man is the possessor, the key is the possessed. So, therefore, possessed equals mudaf, key is the possessed, i.e., the mudaf. Possessor equals man. Rajulun is the possessor, the mudaf ilayhi. How do you say key in Arabic? Miftah. How do you say key in Arabic? Miftah. Okay. Number one, if I want to say this rule, number one, the mudaf comes first, the mudaf ilayhi comes second. Therefore, rajulu miftahin is wrong. Why is rajulu miftahin wrong? Because in our example, who's the owner? Who's the possessor? Rajul, the man. Therefore, the mudaf ilayhi, the possessor, needs to come second. If you say rajulu miftahin, that would mean a keys man. You switch the possessor and the possessed. That would be incorrect. Because miftah is the possessed, it comes first. Rajulun, the possessor, comes second. Mudaf comes first, mudaf ilayh comes second. Therefore, you cannot say rajulu miftahin. You have to invert the structure based on rule number one. And once you invert the structure, you're going to have miftah rajul. This is all based off of rule number one. The possessed, the mudaf comes first, right? And the mudaf ilay, the possessor, comes second. Okay. What if someone says al miftahu rajulin? That is also incorrect because rule number two, the mudaf cannot receive alif lam or tanween. Therefore, al miftahu rajulin is incorrect because al miftahu over there has an alif lam. And we said rule number two is that mudaf cannot have alif lam or tanween. Therefore, miftahun rajulin is also incorrect because rule number two is that mudaf cannot have alif lam or tanween. All right. Rule number three is that mudaf ilayhi, the owner, the possessor, is in the state that is the role mudaf ilayhi, which takes the position of jar, and jar is reflected by ikasra. Someone says miftahu rajulun. Miftahu rajulun, incorrect. Rather, the correct version is miftahu rajulin because the mudaf ilayhi is a role, and this role over here is in the position of jar, and jar is reflected by a kasra, right? الطالب كرسي, incorrect. الكرسي طالب, incorrect. كرسي كرسي الطالب, incorrect. كرسي طالبا, incorrect. كرسي الطالب, that over there is correct. All right, so let's go through the rules once again. الطالب كرسي, why is this incorrect? الطالب كرسي, this is incorrect because mudaf is the possessed, mudaf ilayh is the possessor. The rule in Arabic is that the possessed needs to come first. The student's chair, the student owns the chair. The chair is the possessed. Therefore, chair needs to come first. So we invert this. We make الطالب كرسي into كرسي and then الطالب. كرسي and then الطالب. All right. Rule number two, the mudaf كرسي, the possessed, cannot have alif lam or tanween. Therefore, al-kursiyu, alif lam is there, incorrect. كرسي, tanween is there, incorrect. Both are incorrect. Rule number three, the mudaf ilayhi, the owner, the possessor, is in the state of jar. Therefore, kursiyut taliban is incorrect because talib needs to be in the state of jar. Rather, you have to say kursiyut, the chair of at-talibi, the student. The chair of the student. Mudaf ilay is in is playing the role of mudaf. The word at-talib is playing the role of mudaf ilay, which is in the position of jar, which is reflected by a kasrah. All right. Now there's a few exercises over here. Um, what I want everyone to do is number one, don't worry about finding this in the Quran as of now. Do not worry about finding this in the Quran as of now. We're going to do this ourselves tomorrow in class, bi'idhnillah. For now, what I want you to do is take these words. Miftah means a key. Alim means a scholar. Nar means fire. Sana means the idol. Al-Walid means the child. Take these words and add on any owner. All right, in fact, this is harf al-jar. And we'll leave this exercise. Exercise number 2. Format the following words into a valid mudaf, mudaf ilayh phrase and translate accordingly and apply the rules. I want all rules applied. Rule number 1, A comes first, B comes second. Or before that, mudaf is the possessed. In this example, the possessed is this word. The possessor is this is so and so word. Rule number 1, mudaf comes first, mudaf ilayh comes second. Show it happening. Rule number 2, mudaf does not receive alif lam or tanween. Rule number 3, mudaf ilayh is the role is playing the role of mudaf. The word is playing the role of mudaf ilay. Therefore, it's in the position of jar, and jar is reflected by a kasra in Arabic. So the house is key. Now, I'm just going to give you the vocabulary right now, and this is important. This is beginner level vocab, so do make sure to memorize this. Bayt means house. Key is miftah. All right. A scholar's pen. Scholar is alim. Now, also keep in mind the is specific. A is general. That's just a hint to a mistake that might be made. Qalam means pen. Qalam means pen. A pen of a child. Qalam means pen. Child is walad. The worker's idol. Worker is amil. Okay, you can say mudawim, lakin we'll just use amil because it's simple and easy. And idol is sanam. Sanam with a meme at the end. A knowledge of a believer. Knowledge is ilm. And a believer is mu'min. Right? Al mu'min, the believer. These are the words you need to use. You can take a picture, and obviously, you can just search online, and these words are quite easy to find the Arabic of. Make these 5 into. I've already given you the mudaf mudaf ilayh in English. I want you to make them into Arabic, and make sure you apply the rules in the exact same manner which I applied them. Do not look for mudaf mudaf ilayh in the Quran as of now. You can look for harf al-jar majrur, jar majrur in the Quran, pinpoint, and pinpoint the positions, etc. But for mudaf, mudaf ilayh, do not look for them in the Quran right now. Just apply the rules. That's all there is to it. So to recap the lesson, today we covered 2 phrases. And in covering these 2 phrases, I've given you the 2 roles of jar. I've given you the 2 roles of the jar position. Phrase number 1 is the harf al-jar majrur. Harf al-jar are those huruf that result in jar, i.e. fi, which means in, ala, which means on. This needs to be memorized, the meaning of these words. Min, which means from, and ila, which means to. All right? And whenever they come upon an ism, the upcoming ism will be referred to as in the role of the majrur, and majrur will be reflected by it's in the position of jar. Majrur, that role is in the position of jar, and the position of jar is reflected by a kasra. All right. Mudaf, mudaf ilayh. Mudaf is the possessed. Mudaf ilayh is the possessor. Rule number 1, the possessed needs to come first, i.e. the mudaf needs to come first. The mudaf ilayh comes second. Rule number 2, the mudaf cannot receive alif, lam, or tanween. And rule number 3, the mudaf ilayh, that role, the word that's playing that role, will be in the position of jar. And on account of it being in the position of jar, it will receive a reflection of a kasrah. All right. I hope to see you all tomorrow, bi'idhnillah. And make sure you go through these exercises, the mudaf mudaf ilayh exercise using these words, and then jar majrur exercise, as well as recognizing positions and reflections exercise. Find examples of that in the Quran and make sure you send them. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.